Across the endless plains of Kansas, where the land stretches flat and the sky feels impossibly wide, the wind never truly stops. It whispers through broken barns, howls across empty fields, and rattles the doors of farmhouses that have not been lived in for generations. These were once farming villages built on hope. Families gathered. Crops grew tall. Children laughed beneath open skies. But droughts came. Storms followed. And isolation slowly broke the people who stayed too long. Now, these villages sit abandoned, scattered across the prairie like forgotten memories. Locals say the wind carries voices. That it calls names after sunset. And that figures move through the fields when no one should be there. Travelers who pass through at night report seeing lights flicker in empty homes. Hearing footsteps crunch through dry grass behind them. And feeling watched by something hidden just beyond the horizon. Tonight, we journey into the most haunted windswept farm villages in Kansas. 20 forgotten places where the land remembers hardship, loneliness, and fear. If you were driving alone across the prairie at night and saw a farmhouse light turn on in a village long abandoned, would you stop to investigate or keep driving until the wind swallowed the road behind you? Take a slow breath. The plains are listening. Hello, my dear friend. I am truly grateful that you are here with me tonight. Before we begin, settle in. Let your shoulders relax. Allow the steady rhythm of your breathing to calm your mind. Kansas is known for its wide open spaces. Golden fields. Quiet country roads. A sky that feels endless. But beneath that calm lies a history shaped by struggle. Early farming villages were isolated and unforgiving places. When crops failed, there was nowhere to turn. When storms came, help was days away. Many villages were abandoned after years of hardship. Some after sudden disasters. Others after slow, painful decline. What remained were homes filled with unfinished lives. Barns holding tools left behind in haste. And land that absorbed fear, sorrow, and desperation. Even today, people avoid certain farm villages after dark. They speak of shadows moving across open fields. Of voices carried unnaturally far by the wind. Of figures standing silently at the edges of cornfields, watching. Tonight, I will guide you through 20 of the most haunted windswept farm villages in Kansas. Each one shaped by isolation, loss, and the endless prairie wind. Each one a testament to the unforgiving power of the wind. Each one a reminder that even the bravest of hearts can be broken. Each one a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. Each one a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can still be found. Each one a testament to the unyielding power of the human spirit. Each one a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. Each one a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. Each one a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can still be found. Each one a testament to the unyielding power of the human spirit. Each one a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. Each one a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. Each one a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can still be found. Each one a testament to the unyielding power of the human spirit. Each one a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. And before we take our first step into the fields, let me ask you something. If you found yourself alone in an abandoned farm village at night, with the wind howling through empty homes, would you explore the buildings or would you leave before the darkness fully settled in? The village of Dry Hollow sat in a wide basin where fields stretched farther than the eye could see. Low hills ringed the land, sheltering it from strong winds and once holding just enough moisture to support crops year after year. For generations, families farmed the soil, trusting the seasons and the routines passed down to them. At first, the harvests weakened slowly. One season brought smaller yields. Another brought crops that withered before ripening. Farmers adjusted methods, rotated fields, and worked longer hours, convinced the land only needed patience. Wells were dug deeper. Irrigation lines were repaired again and again. The soil did not recover. Rain became unreliable, arriving too late or not at all. Seed sprouted unevenly, then failed. Entire sections of field turned brittle and pale, cracking under the sun. Each year, hope narrowed to fewer rows. Families held on longer than they should have. They shared food, sold belongings, and leaned on one another as losses mounted. Children learned the weight of quiet disappointment early, watching adults stand in empty fields, staring at land that no longer answered their effort. Eventually, desperation replaced endurance. One by one, families packed what they could carry. Wagons rolled out along the same dirt roads that once brought supplies in. Doors were closed carefully, not in anger, but in grief. By the time the last family left, the village felt unfinished. Fields lay half-worked. Tools remained where they were last used. Houses stood intact, but hollow. The land that once supported life offered nothing in return. Years passed. Grass crept back unevenly. Weeds claimed furrows. Fences sagged. Dry Hollow faded from maps, remembered only by those who once lived there and by travelers who passed the quiet basin without stopping. Then people began noticing movement at night. Drivers traveling along the old road reported seeing shapes between the fields after sunset. At first, they were mistaken for animals or shadows cast by moonlight. But the figures moved differently. They walked upright. Slowly, deliberately, they passed between rows that no longer existed, following paths etched into the land by years of labor. Their heads were bowed, shoulders rounded, as if weighed down by invisible burdens. They moved with purpose, but without urgency. Some paused briefly, bending slightly at the waist, hands lowering toward soil that no longer held crops. The movements resembled tending. Hands reached down, hovered, then withdrew. The gestures repeated across empty fields, carried out with patience that felt endless. Headlights passed. Flashlights swept across the basin. The figures continued their slow work, unaffected by light or sound. As vehicles moved on, the shapes faded back into darkness, leaving fields empty again. Those who returned during the day found nothing unusual. The land looked abandoned and dry, exactly as expected. No footprints marked the soil. No signs of activity explained the night sightings. The phenomenon became more frequent. Local residents nearby began watching from a distance, standing at the edge of the basin after dark. On clear nights, multiple figures appeared at once, spaced across what had once been individual plots. Their spacing matched old property lines. Each figure remained within a familiar boundary, never crossing into another section. They moved back and forth, repeating patterns learned long ago, bound to land that no longer responded. Some figures appeared smaller, others taller. Some moved steadily. Others slowed often, pausing as if tired. Yet all shared the same bowed posture, the same quiet focus, the same refusal to look up. The air around Dry Hollow changed at night. Sound softened, absorbed by the open land. Wind slowed near the basin, even when surrounding areas felt restless. Standing there produced a heavy stillness, as if the fields themselves were holding breath. Those who stayed too long reported a sense of pressure. Not fear, but weight. The feeling of expectation without reward. Muscles felt tired without work. Thoughts grew quiet, pulled inward by the rhythm of repeated motion. Elders from nearby towns shared their beliefs. They said the people of Dry Hollow did not leave because they wanted to. They left because they had no choice. Their final years were spent trying to coax life from soil that refused them. According to those elders, the land remembered that effort. The figures were not trapped. They were continuing. Repeating what had defined them when nothing else remained. Farming was not just work. It was identity, routine, and hope bound together. The figures never appear during rain. On rare nights when storms pass through the basin, the fields remain empty. Only when the land is dry do the figures return, moving under moonlight across soil that never yields. Some believe the figures are reminders. They stand as quiet witnesses to what happens when land and people lose their balance. Others believe they are echoes, patterns worn into the place by years of repeated motion. No one has tried to approach them closely. Those who consider it report an instinctive resistance, a feeling that stepping into the fields at night would be an intrusion into something unfinished. The figures do not ask for help. They simply walk. By dawn, Dry Hollow returns to stillness. The basin fills with pale light. Shadows retreat. The land looks empty again, marked only by weeds and cracked soil. No evidence of movement remains. Yet those who have seen the figures cannot forget them. The bowed heads. The slow steps. The quiet persistence of work without reward. It lingers in the mind long after leaving the area. Dry Hollow remains abandoned, its houses standing but unused, its fields barren. At night, the village comes alive again in a different way. Figures walk between the fields, heads lowered, movements slow and careful, as if still tending crops that no longer grow, unwilling to accept that the land has stopped listening, and unable to stop doing the only thing they ever knew how to do. The harvest never comes. But the work continues. Whisper Wind Village rests on a shallow plateau where the land opens wide and the sky feels unusually close. From a distance, the place looks calm, almost inviting, a scattering of buildings surrounded by tall grass that bends endlessly under a steady breeze. Wind moves through the area day and night, never rising into storms, never fully calming, as constant as breath. The village was named for that wind. Early settlers believed it was a blessing, cooling the air in summer and keeping the land clear of heavy fog. Homes were built with narrow windows and sloped roofs to guide the breeze through rather than resist it. Wind chimes once hung from doorways, their soft tones blending into a familiar background hum. Life adjusted to the sound. People learned to raise their voices slightly when speaking outdoors. Children grew accustomed to sleeping through the whispering air that pressed against walls and slid through cracks. The wind became a presence, noticed but rarely questioned. That changed slowly. Visitors passing through Whisper Wind Village began reporting something unusual. At first, it was dismissed as imagination or fatigue from travel. People claimed to hear voices carried on the breeze, faint and indistinct, blending naturally with the sound of moving air. The voices grew clearer. Travelers walking along the village paths described hearing their names spoken softly, stretched and distorted by wind. The sound came from behind them, always just out of sight. Turning around revealed nothing but empty ground and waving grass. The wind never stopped. Those who stayed longer noticed patterns. The voices did not appear indoors. They did not come during moments of focused conversation. They emerged in quiet moments, when footsteps slowed and attention drifted. The calls were never loud, never urgent, but unmistakably personal. Locals began to avoid certain areas. Open stretches between buildings felt heavier, the wind stronger there. Paths that once saw daily foot traffic fell quiet. People learned to keep moving, to avoid pausing where the breeze seemed to circle rather than pass through. The voices never spoke complete sentences. They called names only, repeating them once or twice before fading back into the sound of wind. Some visitors insisted the voice matched someone they knew, a friend or family member. Others said it sounded like their own voice, softened and distant. No one ever saw a source. Looking behind revealed no figures, no movement, no shift in the air. The village remained empty and open, every direction visible under the wide sky. Yet the certainty of having been addressed lingered. Authorities offered practical explanations. They suggested wind patterns interacting with terrain, carrying distant sounds in unexpected ways. The voices did not stop. As stories spread, fewer people visited Whisper Wind Village. Those who did were warned not to respond if they heard their name. Some visitors made the mistake anyway. They called back into the wind, asking who was there. The response was never immediate. Instead, the breeze shifted slightly, growing cooler, more focused. The name was spoken again, closer this time, still from behind. Those who turned quickly felt a sudden wave of unease. Not fear exactly, but the sensation of having nearly missed something important. The feeling passed once they left the area. But it left a mark, a memory that returned unexpectedly in quiet moments. Over time, the village emptied. Families relocated to places where the air was still at night. Buildings were left standing, windows shuttered, doors secured against weather that never rested. The wind continued to move through empty streets, brushing against structures that no longer responded. Whisper Wind Village became known only through reports. Hikers passing nearby felt compelled to detour through it, drawn by curiosity or the need for rest. Many left quickly. A few stayed longer, attempting to understand the phenomenon. Those who camped overnight reported the strongest experiences. The wind pressed constantly against tents and walls, its sound unbroken. In the early hours before dawn, when the world felt suspended, voices returned more clearly than ever. Names were spoken with careful familiarity, as if chosen deliberately. Turning toward them never revealed anything. The sensation created a constant tension, a desire to look back paired with the certainty that nothing would be there. Some described it as being followed by something that refused to be seen. No physical harm has ever been reported. Visitors leave with stories, not injuries. Yet many describe lingering effects. A heightened awareness of sound. A tendency to turn quickly when hearing their name elsewhere. A sense that the wind carries more meaning than before. Recordings have captured only wind. Audio equipment picks up steady airflow, shifting frequencies, nothing that resembles speech. Playback never matches the clarity of the experience. Those who hear the voices insist the sound is unmistakable in person. Layered within the wind rather than separate from it. The village itself shows little change. Grass grows tall and bends endlessly. Buildings weather slowly, shaped by the same breeze that named the place. The wind never calms enough to allow true silence. Some believe the wind remembers. They suggest it carries echoes of conversations once held there, voices layered over time until they lost their original shape. Others believe the voices belong to something that uses sound rather than form, relying on recognition instead of sight. No explanation has settled the question. Whisper Wind Village remains open, unguarded, quiet except for the constant movement of air. There are no signs warning visitors away, no barriers to entry. The place offers nothing and asks nothing. Yet those who walk its paths know better. They feel the wind at their backs, steady and persistent. They hear their names carried softly, always just behind them. And even when they leave the village and the air finally grows still, some swear they can still feel the breeze, whispering without words, reminding them that it never truly stopped. Old grain row stretches along a flat section of farmland where storage silos once dominated the horizon. For decades, the row functioned as the backbone of the region's harvest, a place where trucks lined up and grain moved continuously from field to steel. The silos stood tall and uniform, their rounded walls catching sunlight by day and reflecting distant lightning at night. Among them was the largest structure on the row, a silo built to handle immense volume. Its interior was a vertical chamber designed to channel grain downward in controlled flow. Workers moved along platforms and ladders inside and around it, listening constantly for changes in sound that signaled shifts in pressure or blockage. On the night of the storm, the wind arrived first. Rain followed in heavy sheets, driven sideways across the fields. Thunder rolled low and continuous, masking smaller sounds. The harvest window was narrow, and the silo was near capacity. Inside, workers monitored the flow, trusting the structure to hold as it always had. It did not. The collapse happened suddenly, without the gradual warnings people expected. A section of the silo wall gave way under combined pressure from grain and storm stress. Steel tore and folded inward. Platforms twisted. The interior became a rushing column as tons of grain dropped at once. By the time the storm passed, the silo was broken open. Emergency crews arrived to find the structure partially collapsed, its interior exposed and distorted. The flow had stopped, but the damage was irreversible. Several workers did not make it out. The remaining silos were shut down soon after, and old grain row fell silent. The site was abandoned rather than rebuilt. Removing the collapsed silo proved too dangerous and expensive. Its remains were fenced off, left as they were. Over time, weeds grew between concrete pads. The other silos rusted quietly. The fields beyond returned to seasonal cycles, but the row itself never recovered. Years later, the sounds began. At first, nearby farmers reported hearing dull impacts during calm nights. A rhythmic pounding, low and repetitive, coming from the direction of the collapsed silo. The problem was that nothing was moving. The silo stood empty. No grain remained inside. Inspections confirmed this repeatedly. Yet the sound persisted, strongest after sunset, when the land cooled and the air grew still. Those who approached described the same experience. Standing near the broken silo, they heard a deep, steady pounding echoing from within the structure. The sound traveled upward and downward at once, as if material were still pouring through a vertical shaft that no longer existed. It did not accelerate or slow. It simply continued. Listening too long created discomfort. The sound was not loud, but it was dense, pressing inward. Vibrations could be felt through the ground, faint but consistent, like the resonance of something heavy in motion. Recordings captured the noise clearly. Audio equipment placed inside the fenced area registered a continuous pattern, similar to grain flow but lacking the variation expected from real movement. Playback confirmed what listeners heard. The sound did not repeat in loops. It behaved as if a process were ongoing without interruption. Wind did not affect it. During rain, the sound continued beneath the weather. Only during full daylight did it fade, becoming barely perceptible, as if overwhelmed by ambient noise. Local belief formed quickly. Those familiar with grain operations noted that workers relied heavily on sound inside silos. The flow of grain was monitored by ear as much as by instruments. A steady pour meant safety. A sudden change meant danger. The final moments inside the collapsed silo were filled with sound and motion beyond control. Some believe that moment never ended. That the structure absorbed the force and repetition so completely it now replays it when conditions allow. The broken silo does not remember the workers themselves, but the process they were part of. Grain moving. Pressure releasing. weight shifting downward without pause. Others speak of the silo as unfinished. The collapse interrupted a flow that was never properly stopped. Grain poured until the structure failed, then ceased abruptly. The pounding, they say, is the echo of that interruption, continuing because it was never allowed to resolve. Visitors who enter the area illegally report additional sensations. Standing close to the silo opening produces a sense of downward pull, not physical, but perceptual. The ground feels slightly tilted toward the structure. The sound seems to originate below, even when heard from higher ground. No visual movement accompanies the noise. The interior remains dark and still. Broken beams hang where they fell. Dust lies undisturbed. There is no sign of material shifting or falling. The pounding exists without cause that can be seen. Those who stay too long often leave unsettled. Sleep that night is light. The rhythm of the sound lingers in memory, repeating behind closed eyes. Some report dreams of vertical spaces and endless descent. Waking with the impression that something is still falling somewhere nearby. At dawn, Old Grain Row looks empty. Sunlight reveals rust, weeds, and the silent bulk of the collapsed silo. Birds perch on broken edges. Wind moves freely through gaps in the metal. The pounding is gone, replaced by ordinary rural quiet. By evening, it returns. As light fades and sound carries farther, the silo resumes its internal echo. Grain pours where none exists. The rhythm continues without urgency or end, as if time inside the structure no longer moves forward. Old Grain Row remains closed, its purpose ended. The fields around it still produce harvests, carried elsewhere for storage and processing. The broken silo stands apart, a reminder of capacity exceeded and control lost. When night settles and the land grows still, the sound returns once more. A steady pounding from within hollow steel. Endless, patient, and unresolved. As if the silo is still full. As if the grain never stopped falling. Red dust flats lies in a wide basin where the land stretches outward in every direction, flat and exposed beneath an open sky. The village was built out of necessity. Early settlers came for trade routes and open space, believing the land could be shaped and settled with enough effort. Homes were raised low and sturdy. Streets were laid wide to break the wind. Life moved slowly, following the sun and the seasons, adapting to the dust rather than fighting it. Then the storms began. They did not arrive like ordinary weather. There was no gradual buildup, no distant warning. One moment the air would be still, the horizon clear. The next, red dust would lift from the ground as if called upward, spinning into dense walls that swallowed sound and sight within seconds. They pressed against buildings, filled lungs and eyes, and erased direction entirely. People became lost within steps of their own doors. Tools vanished from hands. Voices could not be heard even when shouted from only feet away. The storms came repeatedly. Some lasted minutes. Others stretched for hours. Each one left the village more exhausted, more uncertain. Crops failed beneath layers of powder. Animals refused to stay. The dust worked its way into every crack, every joint, every breath. Then people began to report shapes. During the thickest storms, figures appeared within the swirling red clouds. Vague at first, like tricks of the eye. Then clearer. Human outlines moving against the flow of dust rather than with it. Standing where no one should be able to stand. A shoulder. A profile. The suggestion of arms lifted against the wind. They never approached. They never called out. They simply appeared within the storm, visible for seconds before dissolving back into the dust. Fear spread quickly after that. People avoided going outside when the air shifted, even before storms fully formed. Children were kept indoors. Lookouts were posted on rooftops, watching the horizon for signs of movement in the dust. It was thicker than any before, turning daylight into a deep red twilight. Buildings disappeared from view entirely. When it passed, parts of the village were buried. Others stood untouched, as if the storm had chosen its path deliberately. The village of Red Dust Flats was abandoned in stages. Families left what they could not carry. Doors were closed but never locked. Over time, wind and dust reclaimed the space, softening edges and filling rooms until the village became part of the basin again. Years passed. The storms lessened, though they never stopped entirely. Red Dust Flats became a place people spoke of quietly, a landmark travelers avoided unless necessary. Maps still mark it, but few visit intentionally. Those who do report something unsettling. On days that begin calm, without any sign of weather change, red dust sometimes stirs suddenly around visitors. It rises in tight spirals, localized and precise, forming a cloud that does not spread beyond a small area. Within those clouds, figures appear again. They are clearer now than in old accounts. Human-shaped silhouettes moving just inside the dust, always facing inward, never outward. They shift position slowly, as if walking through heavy air, then pause. The moment the dust settles, they are gone. No footprints remain. No marks disturb the ground. The dust simply returns to rest, leaving visitors standing alone in silence. Some describe feeling watched during these moments. Others report a sudden pressure in the ears, a faint ringing that fades when the dust clears. A few experience intense disorientation, losing track of direction even after the cloud vanishes. Attempts to photograph the figures have failed. Images capture only dust, blurred and indistinct. Video footage shows movement where nothing should be, then clears abruptly. Sensors register no unusual wind patterns, no seismic activity, nothing that would explain the sudden localized storms. Researchers suggest natural explanations. Thermal pockets. Unique mineral composition. Unpredictable air currents shaped by the basin. These explanations account for the dust, but not the figures seen within it, or the sense of presence reported by nearly everyone who witnesses them. Locals have their own interpretation. They believe the storms did not simply drive people away. They believe the land remembers movement, panic, and confusion trapped within the dust. That the storms absorbed those moments and now release them in fragments, shaped like the people who once ran through them. They are not ghosts. They are echoes of motion, formed from memory and red earth, briefly reassembled by the wind before falling apart again. They appear only when someone is there to witness them, as if observation gives them shape. Visitors are warned never to walk into the dust. Those who approach the swirling clouds report an overwhelming sense of resistance, like pushing against heavy fabric. Breathing feels difficult. The air grows warm and dry. Most retreat instinctively, feeling that crossing into the cloud would be a mistake. The dust never follows. The figures never step beyond the cloud's edge. They remain contained, bound to the movement of the dust itself. At sunset, Red Dust Flats feels especially uneasy. Light turns the ground a deeper shade of red. Shadows stretch across the basin. Even small gusts can lift dust briefly, making shapes where none exist. Visitors often leave before evening, unwilling to stay as the air cools and movement becomes harder to predict. Those who remain overnight rarely sleep well. Dreams are filled with motion, with walking through clouds that erase direction. Many wake feeling coated in dust despite having stayed indoors or inside vehicles. By morning, the flats return to stillness. The ground lies quiet. Buildings sit half buried, their outlines softened by years of settling dust. The air looks clear, as if nothing ever moves there at all. Yet the land has not forgotten. The dust remembers how to rise. The wind remembers how to shape it. And when someone stands too long in that open basin, the red earth lifts itself once more, swirling suddenly into life, forming brief silhouettes within the cloud. Figures that appear just long enough to be seen. The land is flat and exposed, broken only by low hedges, dirt roads, and the distant line where sky meets soil. From afar, the village appears calm, a cluster of old homes and barns standing quietly against the horizon. By day, nothing seems unusual. Fields ripple with wind. Tractors pass in the distance. Birds circle high above, then scatter across the land. Life moves slowly in Crowfield, shaped by routine and long familiarity with the land. As evening approaches, the crows arrive. They come in waves, dark shapes gathering against the fading sky. At first there are only a few, settling on fence posts and rooftops. Then more follow, filling trees, lining power wires, and covering the edges of buildings. Their numbers grow steadily until nearly every visible surface is dotted with black feathers. The sound is impossible to ignore. Cause overlap and echo, rising and falling in uneven bursts. The noise carries across the farmland, reaching well beyond the village limits. Locals pause their work when it begins, listening as the air thickens with calls. This happens every night. The crows gather with purpose, arriving at nearly the same time, settling into the same places. They do not fight or scatter. They simply wait, restless and watchful, as if anticipating something they understand instinctively. Residents learned long ago not to interfere. Attempts to scare the birds away only delay the gathering briefly. The crows always return, reclaiming rooftops and fences as the sun sinks lower. The silence is complete and immediate, cutting through the air as sharply as the sound once filled it. Hundreds of birds fall quiet at once. No wings flap. No cause echo. The farmland holds its breath. The crows do not leave. They remain perched and still, unmoving shapes against the darkening sky. For a brief moment, Crowfield Village exists in absolute quiet, a silence heavy enough to feel. That is when the footsteps begin. Soft at first, barely audible, they echo along dirt paths and narrow streets. The sound is unmistakably human. Shoes brushing gravel. Weight shifting with each step. The rhythm is slow and deliberate. No one is seen. The footsteps move between houses, around barns, along fences now crowded with silent crows. They wander, turning corners, stopping briefly, then continuing again. Those who hear them describe the same detail. The steps never overlap. There is no rush of movement, no sign of panic. Each footfall lands cleanly, as if placed with care. The sound grows closer, then fades, replaced by another set somewhere else in the village. Windows remain dark. Doors stay closed. Lights are kept low. Residents know better than to look outside when the footsteps begin. Those who have tried report an overwhelming sense of being noticed, even without seeing anything. The crows do not react. They remain silent and motionless as the footsteps pass beneath them. Feathers do not ruffle. Heads do not turn. The birds behave as though they are standing guard, observing without response. The footsteps continue for several minutes. Sometimes they circle the same area repeatedly. Other times they drift outward toward the fields before turning back again. They never leave the village boundaries. Then, without warning, they stop. Silence returns once more, just as complete as before. A few seconds pass. Then a single crow calls out, followed by another. Slowly, the sound returns, spreading through the village as the birds come back to life. The crows take flight together, lifting from rooftops and fences in a coordinated surge. They scatter across the farmland, their calls fading into the distance as night fully settles over Crowfield. By morning, there is no sign of what happened. The village wakes to quiet fields and empty rooftops. Crowfield was not always this way. Long ago, the village suffered a slow decline. Crops failed. Families left. Those who remained grew isolated, spread thin across the farmland. Over time, houses emptied, and routines faded. Records from that period are incomplete. What is known is that many left suddenly, abandoning homes and fields without explanation. Some stayed longer than they should have, clinging to a place that no longer sustained them. Locals believe the crows began gathering shortly after. At first, their presence was dismissed as coincidence. Over time, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The birds arrived as the village emptied. And they stayed as silence replaced voices. The crows, they say, are witnesses. Not bodies, but habits. Movements worn into the village through years of repetition. Walking paths between homes. Crossing fields at dusk. Checking fences one last time before night. They gather not out of fear, but recognition. Animals sensitive to changes people cannot see. They arrive to observe what happens after dark, then leave once it passes. Others believe the birds serve as a boundary. Their silence marks the moment the village shifts, when the familiar gives way to something quieter and unseen. The footsteps replace the calls, filling the space left behind. No one has ever followed the sound. Those who consider it describe an instinctive resistance, a sense that stepping outside would mean crossing into something unfinished. Crowfield Village remains occupied, but cautious. People still live there, tend fields, and pass time as they always have. Yet dusk brings a shared understanding. Work ends early. Conversations soften. Eyes turn inward as the sky darkens. The crows gather faithfully, covering rooftops and fences. Their calls rise and fall until the final light disappears. Then silence falls. Footsteps replace them, wandering through a place that remembers more than it reveals. By morning, the farmland stretches quiet once again, the village unchanged on the surface. But those who live there know. When the crows stop calling, Crowfield is no longer alone. Broken Plough Village once stood at the edge of wide farmland where the soil was dark, heavy, and generous. Rows of crops stretched toward the horizon, shaped by years of careful work and shared effort. The village lived by the seasons, guided by sun, rain, and the steady rhythm of tools moving through earth. Farming was not just work here. It was identity. Barns were built strong and practical, their doors wide enough to welcome wagons and equipment. Fields were divided with intention, each plot known by name and memory. At dawn, the sound of metal meeting soil echoed across the land as plows cut clean lines into the ground. The accident came without warning. On a clear day meant for planting, machinery failed in a way no one expected. A team working the eastern fields heard a sharp crack, then shouting. Metal twisted. Soil was torn open unevenly. What followed ended the Dia's work and changed the village forever. Those who witnessed the accident described it only as tragic and sudden. The fields fell silent. Work stopped where it stood. Tools were dropped and never picked up again. By evening, the village gathered in shock, unsure how to continue in a place that now felt altered. In the weeks that followed, farming slowed. Fields went unattended. Crops were left half-planted. Barns stayed open longer than usual. Doors creaked in the wind. People avoided the eastern fields entirely, choosing instead to work closer to home or not at all. The sound began shortly after. At night, when the land cooled and insects filled the air, a low scraping noise drifted across the fields. It was slow and deliberate, metal dragging through dirt in long, uneven strokes. The sound moved steadily, as if a plow were still being pulled through soil. There were no lights. No lanterns crossed the fields. No figures were seen moving between rows. Yet the sound continued, traveling from one end of the farmland to the other, following paths that had once been used daily. Those who listened described the noise as familiar. It was not violent or frantic. It carried the weight of routine, of repetition. The scrape paused at the ends of rows, then resumed, turning as if guided by practiced hands. Barns were checked repeatedly. Tools still lay scattered where they had been left. Plows rested at odd angles. Handles leaned against walls, untouched. No signs of recent use appeared. Dust settled undisturbed, except for faint trails in the soil outside, visible only under certain light. Villagers stopped sleeping. The sound came every night, always after sunset, always before dawn. Some stayed awake listening, trying to pinpoint its source. Others left their homes, standing on porches and in fields, hearing the scraping pass close by without ever seeing anything. Fear replaced grief. People began to leave Broken Plow Village quietly. Families packed belongings during the day and departed before nightfall. Fields were abandoned mid-season. Livestock was sold or released. The village emptied slowly, leaving behind a place paused between moments. Broken Plow Village became still. By day, the fields looked neglected but peaceful. Crops withered where they stood. Barn doors hung open, swaying gently. Tools remained exactly where they had been dropped, as if waiting for hands that would never return. At night, the work resumed. The scraping sound echoed again, metal against soil, patient and unbroken. The rhythm never rushed. It followed the same patterns night after night, tracing furrows that no longer needed to be made. Visitors who arrived later reported the same experience. They described walking through silent fields after dark, hearing the sound approach slowly from a distance. The scraping grew louder, then passed beside them, close enough to feel through the ground. Standing still made the sound feel heavier. The vibration traveled up through boots and into the legs, settling deep in the chest. Those who tried to follow the noise found it always just beyond reach, moving steadily onward without acknowledging pursuit. The sound never crossed paved roads. It stayed within the farmland, confined to the soil that had once been worked. When the scraping reached the edge of the fields, it turned and began again, as if bound to the land itself. Recordings captured only fragments. Audio devices picked up low metallic friction, distorted and incomplete. Playback never fully matched what was heard in person. The sound seemed to exist more clearly in open air than through equipment. No animals were seen at night. Fields that once held wildlife became quiet after sunset. The accident site remains unchanged. The soil there is uneven, darker than surrounding fields. Tools lie nearby, untouched by rust more than time should allow. Visitors report feeling an urge to leave quickly when standing there, as if the ground itself resists attention. Local explanations vary. Some believe the land remembers the work done upon it, repeating motion long after the workers are gone. Others believe the sound is unfinished labor, continuing because it was never properly ended. No one claims the presence is hostile. It does not chase. It does not approach with intent. It simply works, repeating a task that once defined the village. Broken Plow Village stands empty now. Barns lean under their own weight. Fields grow wild. Fences collapse slowly. By day, it looks like any other abandoned farming settlement. At night, it becomes something else. The sound of metal scraping dirt echoes through the fields once more, steady and persistent. The land seems to breathe with it, holding the rhythm of work that never found rest. The plow moves on. The soil yields. And Broken Plow Village remains, forever caught between the moment work stopped and the night it refused to end. Windmill Cross sits at the edge of open farmland where dirt roads meet and the land stretches flat in every direction. The windmill there was once a simple landmark, tall and narrow, its metal blades turning steadily above a small pump house. For decades, it served nearby farms, lifting water from deep below the ground and marking the crossroads for anyone traveling after dark. The storm that changed everything arrived suddenly. Dark clouds rolled in faster than expected, carrying heavy rain and sharp gusts that cut across the fields. Most people stayed indoors, listening as the wind pushed against barns and fences. The windmill had endured storms before, its structure weathered but trusted to hold. The tower twisted. Bolts sheared. With a sound lost beneath thunder, the windmill collapsed inward, its blades and frame crashing down near the base. A child who had been caught outside did not escape in time. The loss was sudden and devastating, leaving the community shaken and silent. In the days that followed, the windmill was left where it fell. Repairs were discussed, then quietly abandoned. The crossroads lost its marker, and Windmill Cross became a place people passed quickly, without stopping. Time moved on, but the site did not fade. The fallen structure was eventually cleared, yet the central column and upper mechanism remained standing, stripped of function but still upright. The blades were damaged, bent and uneven, unable to catch wind properly. The pump house sat empty, its door hanging loose. Years later, the first reports began. Travelers passing through late at night noticed movement above the crossroads. On evenings when the air was completely still, the windmill blades were seen turning slowly, deliberately, as if guided by an unseen force. The rotation was steady, not erratic, and always in the same direction. There was no wind. Grass lay flat. Dust did not stir. Trees along the field stood motionless. Yet the blades continued to move, metal creaking softly as they completed each rotation. Those who stopped to watch felt an immediate chill, not from temperature, but from the certainty that what they were seeing should not be happening. At dawn, the windmill stood frozen again, blades angled awkwardly, unmoved by the rising sun. Inspectors found no mechanical explanation. Bearings were worn. Gears were misaligned. There was no stored energy capable of producing motion. Then came the sightings beneath it. Witnesses described seeing a small figure standing at the base of the windmill during the same windless nights. The shape appeared child-sized, still and upright, positioned where the shadow of the tower fell longest. The figure never approached and never moved closer. It did not react to observation. Lights shone in its direction revealed nothing but empty ground. Looking away and back again sometimes brought the figure into view once more. It was most often seen just before the blades began to turn, as if the two events were connected. No footprints were ever found. The ground beneath the windmill remained undisturbed, even after rain. No impressions marked where the figure was seen standing. The soil showed only old tire tracks and natural wear from weather. Those who lingered near Windmill Cross reported a strange sensation. The air felt heavier near the base of the tower. Sound seemed distant, muted, as if absorbed by the open space. People described a growing awareness of height, of looking upward without realizing they had done so. The turning blades drew attention skyward, away from the ground. Some felt an urge to step closer. Not out of curiosity alone, but from a sense that something required acknowledgement. The feeling passed quickly once they left the crossroads, replaced by unease at how compelling it had been. Local residents avoid the area after dark. They speak of the windmill as unfinished, a structure frozen between function and ruin. The belief is that the storm interrupted more than metal. It stopped something mid-motion, leaving it incomplete. The child is rarely spoken of directly. Instead, people refer to the figure as the watcher, or simply the one beneath the tower. There is no suggestion of hostility. The presence is described as quiet, patient, and observant. It does not chase or call out. It stands and waits. Recordings taken near the site capture faint metallic sounds on still nights. A slow creak. A measured turn. The audio aligns with the reported motion of the blades. No corresponding wind noise is present. The sound ceases abruptly when the movement stops. No one has seen the figure move away. It does not leave the base of the windmill. It does not cross the road or enter the fields. It remains bound to the structure, as if tied to the moment of collapse itself. At sunrise, Windmill Cross returns to normal. The blades are still. The crossroads is quiet. Birds move through the fields. Passing vehicles leave no sign that anything unusual occurs there at night. Only the tower remains, rusted and bent, standing where it always has. Yet those who have seen it do not forget. They remember the unnatural rotation against a motionless sky. The certainty that the windmill should not move, yet does. They remember the small figure beneath it, framed by shadow, never changing position. Windmill Cross remains open, unmarked, and accessible. There are no fences or warnings. The land does not forbid entry. It simply reveals itself under certain conditions, when the night is calm and the air holds still. On those nights, the blades begin to turn. Slowly. Steadily. And beneath them, a small figure stands where the tower fell long ago, watching the motion above, as if waiting for the storm to finish passing, even though it ended years before. The village of Hollow Fence once stood among wide, open fields where grass rolled gently with the wind and fences stretched farther than the eye could see. Hollow Fence earned its name from the long wooden barriers that surrounded the pastures. The fences were old but sturdy, built with hollowed posts that whistled softly when wind passed through them. At night, that sound became a familiar lullaby, drifting across the fields and into open windows. For generations, the village lived by routine. Livestock were counted at dawn and dusk. Gates were secured. Fires were banked low at night. Nothing about life in Hollow Fence suggested danger or instability. That sense of certainty made the first disappearance especially unsettling. One morning, a farmer found an empty enclosure. The fence was intact. The gate was closed. No tracks disturbed the soil. One animal was simply gone. At first, the loss was attributed to error. A miscount. A gate left open and closed again by chance. These explanations felt reasonable, even comforting. Then it happened again. Animals vanished from different fields, owned by different families, always overnight. No blood. No broken boards. No signs of struggle. The ground showed no tracks leading away. Only the familiar impressions left by animals that should have still been there. Farmers began staying awake at night. They watched the fields from porches and barns, listening for movement. Dogs were kept close, though even they seemed uneasy, refusing to leave lit areas after dark. The hollow fence posts continued to whistle, unchanged, offering no clue to what was happening beyond their sound. Then the cries began. At first, they were faint, easy to mistake for wind or distant animals. But as nights passed, the cries grew clearer. The cries did not sound close. They did not sound far away. They sounded displaced, as if the fields themselves were producing the noise rather than any living creature. The cries rose and fell slowly, never panicked, never urgent, but filled with an unsettling persistence. People searched the fields at dawn. They found nothing. No animals. No remains. No indication of where the sounds came from. Yet each night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the cries returned, drifting across the land with steady rhythm. The village grew tense. Families brought animals closer to their homes, clustering pens near houses and lantern light. Some attempted to reinforce fences, filling hollow posts with stone or earth. The whistling sound stopped in those sections, but the disappearances did not. Those who stayed out after sunset reported strange sensations. The fields felt larger at night, stretching farther than during the day. Familiar landmarks seemed slightly out of place. Sound traveled unevenly, with cries seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Some claimed to see movement in the tall grass. Shadows that shifted without wind. Depressions forming briefly, then smoothing out again. The cries never came from the same place twice. As losses mounted, the village faced a difficult truth. Without livestock, hollow fence could not survive. Animals were not just property. They were livelihood, food, trade, and stability. And no matter what precautions were taken, the fields continued to empty. The final decision was made quietly. Families packed what they could. Homes were closed but not dismantled. Homes were closed but not dismantled. The village did not flee in panic. It withdrew, slowly and reluctantly, leaving the fields behind. After hollow fence was abandoned, the cries did not stop. Travelers passing near the area reported hearing them just after sunset. The sounds drifted across the empty fields, unbroken by fences or distance. Those who tried to locate the source always failed. Walking toward the cries made them fade. Stopping caused them to return from another direction. The effect was disorienting, leading many to turn back before venturing too far into the open land. Researchers suggested natural explanations. Wind passing through hollow structures. Pressure changes in the fields. Animals from distant farms carrying sound unusually well across the flat terrain. None of these theories explained why the cries matched the animals that once lived there, or why they appeared only after sunset. The fences themselves became objects of unease. At night, the hollow posts no longer whistled with the wind. Instead, they seemed to carry sound inward, drawing it along the fence lines. Standing near them, visitors reported the cries growing louder, closer, even when the surrounding fields remained empty. The sense was not aggressive, but attentive, like a place waiting for something to return. Those who lingered too long felt compelled to leave. A heaviness settled in the chest. Breathing became shallow. The cries took on an emotional quality that was difficult to ignore. Not fear, but longing. A call that felt unfinished, unresolved. No one has ever recovered the missing animals. No remains have been found beneath the soil. No evidence points to theft or predators. The fields remain quiet by day, peaceful enough to suggest nothing ever happened there at all. But when the sun sets, hollow fence reveals its memory. The cries rise again, drifting across the open land, carried gently by air that no longer whistles through the fence posts. They do not grow louder with time. They do not fade completely. They simply persist. Locals say the fields learned how to hold sound. That the land absorbed the final moments of confusion and loss, replaying them endlessly as the day gives way to night. The cries are not warnings, nor calls for help. They are echoes of presence, repeating because nothing ever replaced what was taken. Children raised nearby are taught not to answer the sounds. Parents tell them that following the cries leads nowhere, that the fields are empty now, and whatever calls out does not want to be found. Hollow fence remains standing, its buildings weathered but intact. Grass grows tall around the fences. Paths have faded. The land looks ready for life to return, yet no one settles there. Farmers avoid grazing animals near the old village. Travelers pass quickly, unwilling to stop after sunset. Because when darkness falls, and the fields cool under open sky, and the cries drift once more across hollow fence. Not from any pen or pasture, but from the land itself. Calling softly into the night. Reminding anyone who listens that something was taken and never given back. And that some places remember loss long after everything else has moved on. Dust Ridge Village sits atop a low hill where dry earth meets open sky. The land around it is quiet and sparse, marked by winding dirt roads and stretches of pale grass that bend easily in the wind. From a distance, the village looks intact, a small cluster of buildings silhouetted against the horizon. It was not always abandoned. Dust Ridge once served as a stopping point for travelers crossing long, unforgiving terrain. Homes were built close together for protection from wind and isolation. Lanterns burned in windows at night, guiding late arrivals safely up the hill. Life there was simple and deliberate. People rose with the sun, worked until dusk, and gathered indoors as darkness settled. The glow of lantern light became a familiar sight, steady and reassuring, visible for miles across the flat land below. Then the village began to thin. Trade routes shifted. Wells grew unreliable. Younger families left first, followed slowly by others who could no longer sustain life on the ridge. Each departure was quiet, doors closed carefully, lanterns extinguished one by one. Eventually, Dust Ridge emptied. Houses remained standing, roofs intact, windows unbroken. From afar, nothing suggested abandonment. The village waited, unchanged by time except for the absence of people. That was when the lights returned. Travelers passing along the distant road noticed warm glows in the windows after sunset. Lantern light flickered softly behind glass panes, steady and inviting. The sight was unexpected but comforting, a sign of life where none was marked on maps. Those who saw the lights often felt drawn toward them. The hill was visible from far away, and the glow appeared constant, unaffected by wind or distance. Some assumed the village had been resettled. Others believed they had simply missed updates. As visitors approached, the lights changed. At first, they dimmed slightly, as though turned down. With each step closer, the glow weakened further, retreating deeper into the buildings. The village grew darker the nearer one came. Then, without warning, the lights vanished entirely. Windows that glowed moments before now reflected only starlight. Houses stood dark and empty. The lanterns that had guided the approach left no trace behind. Those who reached the village found silence. Doors were closed but unlocked. Interiors were bare, stripped of furniture and personal belongings. Dust covered floors evenly, undisturbed by recent movement. There were no lanterns inside, no oil, no wicks, nothing that could have produced the light seen from below. Visitors who stayed overnight reported no lights returning. The village remained dark throughout the night, as quiet as it appeared by day. Yet when they left at dawn and looked back from the road, the lights were there again, glowing faintly in windows that had been empty hours earlier. The pattern repeated. The lights appeared only at a distance. They faded as someone drew near. They returned once the observer moved away. No one has ever touched a lantern at Dust Ridge. Some visitors attempted to watch from the hillside. They stopped partway up the road and waited, hoping to observe the change. From that position, the lights remained visible. But any attempt to move closer caused them to dim again, as if responding directly to proximity. The effect was precise. One step forward softened the glow. One step back restored it. The light seemed aware of distance, adjusting with uncanny accuracy. Sound behaved strangely near the village. Footsteps echoed more than expected. Wind dropped suddenly near doorways. Voices felt muted, absorbed by the buildings rather than reflected. Speaking aloud produced discomfort, as if the space preferred quiet. Locals from surrounding areas shared their beliefs. They said Dust Ridge never fully let go of its evenings. The village had been defined by nightfall, by the ritual of lighting lanterns and settling in together. When the people left, the habit remained. The lights, they believed, were not meant to be reached. They existed as markers considered complete only when observed from afar. Approaching disrupted the pattern, collapsing it into darkness. Others believed the lights were memories. They appeared as they once had, at the same height, the same windows, the same soft intensity. But memories cannot be entered. They fade when approached too closely. Some travelers reported seeing movement behind the glass. Shadows passed briefly across illuminated windows, indistinct and fleeting. The shapes never repeated and could not be captured clearly. As with the lights themselves, any attempt to approach caused them to disappear. No sound accompanied the movement. No voices carried from the village. No doors opened. Attempts to document the phenomenon failed. Photographs taken from a distance showed faint glows. Images taken closer revealed only dark windows. Video recordings behaved the same way, the lights retreating frame by frame as the camera advanced. The village resisted clarity. Standing within Dust Ridge produced a sense of absence rather than presence. It felt unfinished, as though something essential had been removed but left an outline behind. The buildings stood ready, but nothing occupied them. At night, the effect deepened. Stars filled the sky above the hill. The land below lay dark and empty. Looking back from the road, the village glowed softly again, lantern light warming windows that had been cold moments before. The lights never flicker violently. They do not flash or surge. They remain calm, steady, and patient, as if waiting for something that will not arrive. No one has ever stayed long enough to see the lights turn off from within the village. Those who linger feel an increasing sense of displacement, as though occupying a space that no longer belongs to the present. Dust Ridge Village remains unmarked and unguarded. No fences block the road. No signs warn travelers away. The hill remains accessible, open, and silent. Yet the lights continue to appear. They glow at dusk, visible from miles away, drawing attention without offering welcome. They guide no one home and illuminate nothing that can be reached. As night deepens, the lanterns remain, suspended between distance and memory. Approach them, and they vanish. Step away, and they return. Dust Ridge does not hide. It reveals itself only when watched from afar, holding on to the shape of a village that still believes someone is coming, even if it will never allow them to arrive. Prairie End Village sits where the open plains stretch so wide that the horizon feels distant even on the clearest days. The land is flat and exposed, shaped by wind and seasons rather than trees or hills. In warmer months, the village once felt connected and resilient, its homes clustered together for shelter against storms that rolled in without warning. Winter was always the true test. Snow arrived early and stayed late, covering roads and fields in thick, drifting layers. Families prepared carefully, storing food, sealing windows, and stacking firewood high. Then came the winter that ended everything. It began with a storm that arrived faster than expected. Wind howled across the plains, carrying snow so dense it erased distance entirely. Roads vanished beneath white sheets. Travel became impossible within hours. Still, the village remained calm, believing the storm would pass as others had. It did not. Temperatures dropped steadily, turning the world brittle and silent. Snow piled against doors and walls, sealing homes in place. Communication with nearby towns failed. Prairie End Village was alone, cut off by weather and distance. When the storm finally eased weeks later, nothing moved. A relief party reached the village expecting exhaustion and hardship. Instead, they found silence. No smoke rose from chimneys. No tracks marked the snow between houses. Doors were closed, but not barred. Inside the homes, everything remained as it had been left. Beds were neatly made, blankets pulled tight as if waiting for night. Tables were set with dishes. Pots sat on stoves with meals half prepared, ingredients arranged carefully, untouched by time. Firewood was stacked by hearths, unused. There were no signs of struggle. No damage. No messages. No indication of panic or evacuation. Entire families had vanished, leaving behind spaces that felt paused rather than abandoned. Searches extended outward across the plains. Teams followed frozen roads and wind-carved paths, but found no tracks leading away from the village. The snow preserved everything except answers. Authorities could not explain it. Weather records showed extreme conditions, but nothing that would force such a sudden disappearance. No evidence suggested migration or rescue attempts. The village remained a question without a solution. As years passed, Prairie End Village was left alone. Buildings weathered slowly. Paint peeled. Snow drifted in through broken shutters. Yet the interiors changed very little. The cold preserved what time would normally erase. Meals remained half-prepared, untouched by decay beyond what the seasons allowed. Visitors who entered the village reported an unsettling feeling. By day, the emptiness felt heavy but manageable. The silence pressed in, broken only by wind sliding through open doorways. It was at night that the village changed. Shadows moved through the homes. They were subtle at first, barely noticeable shifts along walls and doorframes. As darkness settled fully, the movement became clearer. Shapes passed from room to room, crossing floors and climbing stairs as if following familiar paths. They did not respond to light. The movement was smooth and deliberate, never hurried, never erratic. Those who watched felt the urge to look away. The sensation was not fear exactly, but intrusion. It felt wrong to observe, as if the village still considered itself occupied and did not welcome attention. Sounds accompanied the movement. Soft creaks echoed where footsteps should have been. A chair shifted slightly. A door moved against its frame. These noises were faint but distinct, blending into the wind so seamlessly that it became difficult to tell where one ended and the other began. No voices were heard. The village remained quiet, save for the sounds of use without presence. Meals were never finished. Beds were never disturbed. The shadows moved as if repeating routines, not creating new ones. Those who stayed overnight rarely slept. The sensation of activity made rest difficult. Visitors described feeling watched, not by a single source, but by the awareness of being in a place that believed itself alive. Some reported seeing figures pause near windows. The shadows linger there briefly, facing outward toward the plains, as if waiting for something beyond sight. Then they moved on, disappearing into other rooms. Morning brought stillness. With the first light, the shadows vanished. Homes returned to their lifeless state. Nothing appeared changed. No objects were out of place. Theories spread quietly. Some believed the villagers never truly left, caught in a moment preserved by the cold. Others suggested the winter itself took more than lives, imprinting routine onto the space where it had been strongest. No explanation satisfied everyone. What remained was the village itself, unchanged in purpose if not in population. Prairie End Village continued to exist as if waiting for its families to return. Locals avoid the area after dark. They warn travelers not to enter the village at night, not because of danger, but out of respect. They say the place still belongs to those who vanished, and interruption feels unwelcome. The plains around Prairie End Village remain open and silent. Wind moves freely. Snow falls and melts with the seasons. The world continues without pause. Inside the village, time feels slower. Beds remain made. Meals remain half prepared. Shadows move through the homes at night, following paths learned long ago. The routines repeat without bodies, without voices, without end. Prairie End Village stands at the edge of memory and weather. A place where life did not leave so much as it simply stopped being seen. And when night falls across the plains, the village remembers what it was. Moving softly through empty rooms, as if waiting for morning that never fully arrives. Tall Grass Village lies beyond a stretch of open prairie where wind usually moves freely and sound carries far. From a distance, the barns appear ordinary, weathered structures scattered among high grass and fading fences. Their roofs slope gently. Their doors hang open or rest half closed. Nothing about them suggests danger. The quiet does. Visitors approaching the village often notice the silence before anything else. It is not the peaceful stillness of a resting place, but an absence so complete it feels deliberate. No insects buzz in the grass. No birds call from the rafters. Even the wind seems to soften as it passes through the area, losing its voice. Tall Grass Village was once active. The barns stored grain and hay, sheltering animals through long seasons. People moved constantly between them, repairing beams, loading wagons, and tending livestock. Sound defined the place. Hooves struck earth. Insects filled the air. The rhythm of rural life echoed between wooden walls. The quiet came gradually. Farmers first noticed animals refusing to enter certain barns. Horses stopped at thresholds, ears pinned back. Livestock grew restless when led inside, pulling away without obvious reason. Workers assumed pests or structural issues were to blame, but inspections revealed nothing unusual. Then the insects disappeared. Flies that once swarmed around feed vanished. Crickets stopped calling at dusk. Even in midsummer, the air inside the barns remained empty and still. The absence was subtle at first, noticeable only to those who spent long hours there. As weeks passed, the silence deepened. Stepping inside a barn produced a strange sensation in the ears, a pressure similar to sudden altitude change. Swallowing did not relieve it. The feeling intensified the longer one remained inside, accompanied by a growing awareness of the surrounding quiet. People began to leave early. Workdays shortened. Tasks were moved outdoors whenever possible. Those who stayed inside too long reported headaches and disorientation. Conversation felt difficult, as if voices were being dampened before fully forming. Eventually, Tall Grass Village emptied. Barns were left standing, tools set down where they were last used. The grass grew tall around them, swallowing paths and fences alike. Years later, visitors returned out of curiosity. The barns remained intact, preserved by dry air and neglect. From the outside, they looked unchanged. It was only when stepping inside that the silence revealed itself fully. The moment the threshold was crossed, sound seemed to drop away. Footsteps landed without echo. Clothing brushed against skin without rustle. Breathing sounded distant, as if heard through water. The pressure in the ears built quickly, creating discomfort that urged retreat. Some described the sensation as being listened to. Not by something visible, but by the space itself. The silence felt focused, directional, as though attention was being applied rather than removed. Standing still made the pressure worse. Movement provided slight relief, but did not restore normal sound. The barns feel empty in a way that goes deeper than vacancy. Audio recordings taken inside the structures reveal almost nothing. Even insects that thrive in abandoned spaces do not appear. No animals enter the barns. Birds avoid the rafters. Mice leave no traces. Even insects that thrive in abandoned spaces do not appear. The absence extends beyond hearing. Microphones capture faint ambient noise, but playback lacks depth. Sounds seem flattened, stripped of natural resonance. Visitors who linger report escalating symptoms. The pressure in the ears intensifies, sometimes accompanied by nausea or dizziness. Some experience a tightening sensation behind the eyes. Others report a sudden urge to leave, driven by discomfort rather than fear. The silence does not follow outside. Stepping back into the open air restores normal sound almost immediately. Wind resumes its voice. Insects can be heard again in nearby grass. The contrast is sharp enough to feel disorienting. Local belief centers on accumulation. The idea that years of repetitive sound and movement shaped the barns into containers for silence once activity ceased. That the absence of life did not disperse, but condensed, forming a presence defined by what is missing. Others suggest the barns became barriers. That something within them dampens vibration, absorbing sound before it can reflect or spread. The effect is localized, precise, and persistent, resisting explanation through structure or materials alone. Those who return repeatedly describe a growing awareness. Each visit feels heavier, as if the silence recognizes familiarity. The pressure builds faster. Tolerance shortens. Some report hearing faint internal sounds, heartbeat or breath amplified by contrast, creating the illusion that the barn responds. No one has stayed overnight inside. Those who attempted to camp nearby describe restless sleep and vivid dreams of enclosed spaces where sound cannot escape. They wake with ears ringing, despite the absence of noise. At dawn, the barns appear unchanged. Sunlight reveals dust motes suspended in still air. Wooden beams cast long shadows. Nothing moves. Nothing calls attention to itself. The silence waits, contained within walls that once echoed with life. Tall Grass Village remains accessible. There are no fences, no warnings, no restrictions. The land does not forbid entry. It simply presents an environment that challenges the senses in subtle, persistent ways. Those who visit briefly may notice nothing beyond quiet. Those who step inside and remain begin to understand why the village was abandoned. The silence is not passive. It presses inward, creating pressure that cannot be relieved by ordinary means. It does not shout or threaten. It listens. And the longer one stands within it, the more it feels as though the absence itself has weight, attention, and awareness. Turning the barns of Tall Grass Village into spaces where sound once lived, and silence learned how to stay. Stonewell Village once stood at the center of a dry plateau where survival depended on a single source. The well was older than the houses around it, carved deep into pale stone and reinforced over generations. Every path in the village led toward it. Every day began and ended there. Water shaped everything. Homes were built close together to reduce distance. Fields were planted in careful patterns that followed the limits of what the well could support. Children learned early how many buckets could be drawn without lowering the level too far. The sound of rope sliding against stone was as familiar as breathing. For centuries, the well never failed. Then the water began to change. At first, it tasted different. Slightly metallic. Slightly warm. People dismissed it as seasonal shift. Then the level began to drop. Slowly enough to ignore at first, but steadily enough to notice. Buckets came up lighter. The echo from the shaft deepened. Villagers adjusted their routines. Water was rationed. Crops were reduced. Livestock numbers fell. Every drop was measured, every bucket counted. Elders insisted the well had always recovered before. They believed patience would be rewarded. It was not. One morning, a bucket struck stone. The sound was sharp and unmistakable. No splash followed. Rope was lowered farther, then farther still, until it could descend no more. The well, which had sustained the village for generations, was empty. Panic did not come immediately. People gathered in silence, staring down into the dark shaft. The air rising from below felt dry and stale, carrying no hint of moisture. Calls echoed back hollow and thin. There was nothing to retrieve. The village held on for weeks. Water was brought from distant sources, carried in by those strong enough to make the journey. It was never enough. The land around Stone Well Village had been settled because the well existed. Without it, there was no reason to stay. The decision to leave was made slowly. Families packed what they could. Homes were shuttered. Tools were left behind. The well was covered with a heavy stone slab. More from tradition than hope. No one spoke as they walked away. Stone Well Village was abandoned without conflict or violence. Just absence. Years passed. Wind wore down the edges of buildings. Roofs sagged. Paths faded. Yet the well remained, its stone mouth still visible at the center of the ruins, the slab cracked but unmoved. Then the voices began. Travelers passing near the ruins reported hearing sound rising from the well. At first, it was mistaken for wind, funneled through the shaft. But the sound carried shape and rhythm, rising and falling with intention. Words formed. They were faint, strained, echoing up from deep below. Voices called out for water. Not shouted. Not demanded. Pleaded. Begging. Those who approached the well described an immediate chill despite the heat of the plateau. Leaning over the opening brought a wave of dizziness, as if the depth itself pulled at balance and breath. The voices came from far below. They echoed against stone, overlapping slightly, never speaking in unison. Each voice sounded exhausted, dry, worn thin by thirst. Some sounded young. Others old. All carried the same need. Begging for water. No one ever heard the same words twice. The pleas changed subtly each time, though the message remained the same. They did not respond to questions. They did not acknowledge listeners. They repeated their requests endlessly, rising from darkness that seemed deeper than the well should allow. Those who tried to shout down found their voices swallowed. Sound dropped straight into the shaft and did not return. Only the begging continued, unaffected by response or silence. Researchers who investigated the site found nothing unusual at first. The well measured deep, but not impossibly so. Airflow was minimal. Acoustics explained some echo, but not the clarity of speech. No underground water sources were detected. No caverns or tunnels showed on scans. Yet the voices persisted. Equipment left near the well often malfunctioned. Recordings captured distorted murmurs, sometimes nothing at all. Witnesses insisted the voices were clear in person, full of emotion and strain. Locals offered their own explanation. They believed the well did not simply run dry. They believed it was emptied too quickly, taken for granted until nothing remained. According to these stories, the well absorbed desperation as it drained, holding on to the final moments when water was lowered again and again, each time expected to return. They say the well learned thirst. The voices, they believe, are not trapped people, but echoes of need itself, shaped by generations who depended on the well without considering its limits. The shaft remembers every bucket lowered, every anxious wait for splash that never came. Visitors who linger near the well report physical effects. Dry mouth. Tight chest. A sudden awareness of thirst, even after drinking recently. Some feel compelled to bring water with them, to pour it down the shaft in response to the voices. Those who do describe mixed results. The voices pause briefly when water is poured. Silence follows for several seconds, sometimes longer. Then the begging resumes, unchanged, as if the relief was never enough. No amount of water has silenced the well permanently. Standing too long at the edge creates an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Children are warned never to approach the well. Parents tell them the voices are not people and cannot be helped. They explain that some needs cannot be satisfied once they have gone too long unanswered. Stone Well Village remains uninhabited. The ruins crumble slowly, but the well endures, its stone mouth open to the sky. At dusk, when air cools and sound carries more clearly, the voices grow louder, rising steadily from below. Travelers who pass nearby often stop at a distance, listening without approaching. They describe the sound as haunting not because it is frightening, but because it feels unfinished. The well does not rage. It only asks. Again and again. For water that wants to find a village. And for attention long after everyone who depended on it. Learn to leave. Stone Well Village fell silent generations ago. But beneath its center, the well continues to speak. Echoing its thirst into the open air. Reminding anyone who listens that some places remember. Being relied upon, and never forget what it felt like to be emptied. The village of Crooked Road sits beside a long dirt path that curves gently through open land before disappearing into low hills. The road looks ordinary at first glance, worn smooth by years of use, its edges softened by grass and wind. During the day, it feels familiar, almost comforting, a simple route connecting fields to homes. The village grew around that road. Homes were built facing it. Shops opened along it. Children once ran its length, kicking dust into the air as they moved between houses. Over time, the village thinned. Work moved elsewhere. Younger families left. Eventually, even they were gone, leaving Crooked Road to stretch quietly past dark windows and locked doors. The road remained. Travelers still used it as a shortcut, especially those on foot. It offered a direct route through otherwise empty land, and maps showed nothing unusual about it. The first reports came from hikers passing through near dusk. They felt followed. At first, it was subtle. A sense of presence just beyond sight. The feeling that someone else shared the road, walking at the same pace, breathing the same air. When they listened closely, they heard footsteps behind them. The steps matched exactly. Each footfall landed in perfect rhythm, neither faster nor slower. Gravel shifted in the same pattern. Dust stirred with the same timing. The sound was unmistakable, close enough to be personal. Turning around revealed nothing. The road stretched empty in both directions, uninterrupted and still. No figure stood behind them. No shadow moved across the path. Yet when they resumed walking, the footsteps returned instantly, resuming their precise match. Stopping caused them to stop. The moment a traveler halted, the footsteps ceased as well. Silence fell completely, broken only by wind or distant insects. Waiting did nothing. The presence remained unannounced. Taking a single step forward restarted the sound. The footsteps resumed without delay, perfectly aligned with movement, as if the road itself responded. Some travelers tested it, changing pace suddenly or dragging a foot. They adjusted immediately, mirroring every change. Faster walking produced faster steps. Slower movement softened the sound. No lag. No variation. Panic often followed. Those unfamiliar with the road tried to run. The footsteps ran with them, never gaining, never falling behind. Others froze, standing still until the sound stopped, then slowly turned, only to see empty space. The road offered no answers. No one ever saw what followed them. There were no glimpses from the corner of the eye, no fleeting shadows. The experience was entirely auditory and instinctive, felt more than seen. Locals who once lived near Crooked Road were not surprised. They said the road had always been strange, even when the village was full. Children avoided walking it alone at night. Adults preferred company when returning home after dark. The feeling of being matched, they said, had always been there. When the village emptied, the road remained active. Those who studied the area noted something unusual. The dirt path showed no extra footprints, even after multiple reports of the phenomenon. Only the tracks of the visible traveler appeared, clear and singular. The sound left no trace. Investigators placed recording equipment along the road. Microphones captured the footsteps clearly, yet analysis showed only one set of steps. Cameras showed nothing. Video revealed empty stretches of road, grass moving gently, dust settling naturally. The following presence never appeared visually. The road itself seemed involved. Crooked Road curves gently but never sharply. Its bends are subtle, almost imperceptible. Walking it produces a sense of continuous motion without clear landmarks. Distance feels stretched, as though the road takes longer to walk than expected. Some believe the road mirrors. Not reflections of bodies, but of movement. They say the path learned the rhythm of walking over generations, absorbing steps until it could repeat them without a source. Others believe the road holds memory. People once walked it daily, sharing the same pace, the same routes. Over time, those patterns became fixed, replaying whenever someone walks alone. The following presence never leads. It stays behind, always just out of reach, never passing or falling back. It does not guide, warn, or threaten. It simply accompanies. Those who leave the road notice the change immediately. Stepping off onto grass or turning down a side path breaks the effect. Silence returns, normal and expected. Looking back at Crooked Road reveals nothing unusual. Returning to the road restarts it. The footsteps resume the moment feet touch dirt again. As if the road has been waiting. Some travelers choose to walk backward. They report the sound shifting, remaining aligned, now ahead instead of behind. Matching movement exactly. Yet turning around still reveals empty space. The effect persists until the road ends. At the far edge of Crooked Road, where it fades into open land, the footsteps stop permanently. Crossing that invisible boundary produces relief so immediate it often leaves travelers breathless. Behind them, the road lies quiet. No sound follows beyond that point. The village of Crooked Road remains abandoned. Houses stand empty. Windows stare blankly toward the path. Wind moves through tall grass where voices once carried. Nothing about the place looks threatening. Yet the road continues its behavior. It does not chase. It does not trap. Simply matches. Those who walk it are never alone, even when nothing can be seen. Their movement is echoed perfectly, step for step, as if something unseen shares the journey. Stopping brings silence. Walking brings company. Crooked road does not reveal what follows. It offers no shape, no form, no explanation. It only reflects motion back to those who choose to travel it. And for anyone who listens closely while walking that long dirt path beside the empty village, the realization comes quietly and without warning. Every step you take is already being taken. Exactly the same way. At exactly the same time. Just behind you. Nightfield Village once relied on its fields more than its streets. Crops stretched outward in every direction, broken only by fences and narrow dirt paths worn smooth by years of use. The land was open and exposed, and farmers depended on simple tools and careful routines to protect what they grew. Scarecrows were part of that routine. They stood at measured intervals across the fields, built from worn clothing, straw, and wooden posts. Each one faced outward, watching over the crops and marking the edges of planted rows. Their positions were deliberate, placed to guard against animals and to help workers orient themselves during long days. When Nightfield Village was active, the scarecrows were adjusted often. Hats were replaced after storms. Arms were tied back when wind grew too strong. Children learned to recognize them as landmarks, counting rows by the shapes and colors they wore. They were familiar, harmless, and expected. The village emptied slowly. Farming became unsustainable as markets shifted and weather patterns changed. Families left one by one, taking livestock and equipment but leaving the fields as they were. The final harvest was never completed. The scarecrows remained standing, facing outward, waiting for work that would not return. By day, Nightfield Village appears abandoned but ordinary. The fields are overgrown now, crops replaced by tall grass and weeds. The scarecrows still stand, weathered and sagging, their straw exposed through torn fabric. They lean at slight angles, fixed in place by posts driven deep into soil. At dusk, something changes. Visitors who remain near the fields as the sun lowers report an uneasy stillness. The air cools quickly, and shadows stretch long across the ground. As light fades, the scarecrows seem more prominent, their shapes sharper against the darkening landscape. When night fully settles, their positions are no longer the same. Scarecrows that once faced the fields now face the village. Others turn toward the road that leads away from Nightfield. A few stand angled between, as if caught mid-decision. The changes are subtle but undeniable, noticeable only when compared to memory or daylight photographs. No one has ever seen them move. There are no tracks in the soil. No disturbed ground around the posts. The scarecrows remain firmly planted, yet their orientation shifts between dusk and dawn. Wind does not account for it. Storms do not knock them loose. None face the fields anymore. The effect is unsettling. Those who visit multiple nights notice patterns. Some scarecrows consistently turn toward the houses, aligning themselves to watch doorways and windows. Others face the road, positioned as if observing anyone who might arrive or leave. None face the fields anymore. The effect is unsettling. Standing in the village at night creates the sensation of being observed from multiple directions. The scarecrows do not block paths or approach, but their attention feels focused, intentional. Light from flashlights catches on buttons, burlap, and straw, giving the impression of faces where none exist. Sound behaves strangely near the fields. Footsteps feel louder, then abruptly muted. Wind moves unevenly, rustling grass without touching fabric. The scarecrows remain still, unaffected by the elements that surround them. Attempts to reposition them fail. Visitors who turn a scarecrow back toward the field during daylight find it facing the village again by nightfall. Some have marked posts or ground to track movement. The markings remain undisturbed, even as orientation changes. No damage accompanies the movement. Posts do not loosen. Soil does not shift. The scarecrows do not fall or degrade faster than expected. They simply turn, quietly and completely, as if the concept of facing matters more than the act itself. Local stories offer little comfort. Former residents recall warnings passed down without explanation. They were told never to leave the scarecrows facing the houses overnight. The reason was never discussed openly. It was treated as common sense, like locking doors or storing tools properly. Those who ignored the advice reported strange dreams. They described standing in the fields at night, unable to move, surrounded by figures watching silently. Waking brought relief, but the unease lingered long after sunrise. No one claims the scarecrows are hostile. They do not advance. They do not interfere physically. Their presence feels passive, yet purposeful, as if they are fulfilling a role that no longer belongs to them. Wildlife avoids the area at night. Animals skirt the edges of the fields but do not cross them. Birds roost elsewhere. Insects grow quieter after dusk, leaving an unnatural hush broken only by distant wind. Cameras have captured the changes, but not the movement. Time-lapse footage shows scarecrows facing one direction at sunset and another by morning. The transition itself never appears on film. Frames between positions show no blur, no intermediate angle. Investigators have found no explanation. Magnetic fields show nothing unusual. Ground surveys reveal no mechanisms. The village remains structurally sound, its emptiness offering no clues. Nightfield Village feels different after dark. The houses seem smaller. The roads feel narrower. The fields press inward, defined not by crops but by the presence of figures that no longer serve their original purpose. Those who walk the road at night feel watched until they leave the area. The sensation fades gradually with distance, replaced by uncertainty rather than relief. Looking back often reveals scarecrows facing directly toward the road, aligned as if tracking departure. By morning, everything appears unchanged. Scarecrows face the fields again. The village returns to its abandoned stillness. Light softens shapes and removes intention from posture. But dusk always comes. As shadows lengthen, the fields grow quiet. And when darkness settles fully over Nightfield Village, the scarecrows turn once more. Some face the houses. Some face the road. And none face the fields they were meant to guard, as if their attention has shifted permanently, away from crops and towards something that no longer moves, but is still being watched. For years, the design worked. The trees grew thick and close together, their trunks forming a continuous wall. When storms arrived, the village behind them felt sheltered. Wind dropped in volume. Debris fell harmlessly among branches instead of striking homes. The sound of weather softened into a steady murmur filtered through leaves and bark. Life settled into routine. Homes clustered tightly behind the windbreak. Paths wound between buildings. The trees became part of daily life, a constant presence that defined the village boundary. Children were warned not to wander too deep into them, but the warning felt practical rather than fearful. The first sightings happened during an unusually strong storm. Rain drove sideways, and wind struck the tree line with sustained force. As villagers watched from windows, shapes appeared between the trunks. At first, they were mistaken for branches bending or shadows cast by lantern light. Then they stood upright. They did not move forward or backward. They simply stood there, rising higher than any person should, their heads brushing the lower canopy. Those who saw them felt immediate unease. The figures did not match the rhythm of the storm. While branches swayed and bent, these shapes remained steady, adjusting only slightly, as if stretching to remain vertical. Their height seemed to increase the longer the wind blew, elongating upward without widening. When the storm passed, the figures vanished. Morning revealed only trees and debris. No marks were left on the ground. No damage suggested intrusion. The event was dismissed as exhaustion and fear combined with poor visibility. But it happened again. Each time heavy wind struck the village, figures appeared between the trees. They never crossed into the open space behind the windbreak. They remained confined to the line itself, occupying the narrow corridors where trunks stood closest together. The figures were thin, darker than shadow, yet not fully solid. Their proportions were wrong. Legs appeared too long. Torsos stretched upward beyond expected limits. Arms, when visible, hung low and straight, nearly reaching the ground. They did not face the village. Instead, they oriented toward the wind, as if aligned with its direction. Their presence seemed tied to force rather than sight, appearing strongest when gusts peaked and fading slightly when the wind dropped. Some villagers noticed a disturbing detail. The figures appeared to grow taller as the storm intensified. During the strongest winds, they seemed to reach into the upper branches, their outlines blurring with the canopy. When gusts weakened, their height reduced, compressing downward without bending. Sound behaved strangely during these moments. The roar of wind softened near the tree line, replaced by a low, steady tone that did not fluctuate. Animals reacted first. Livestock refused to approach the trees during storms, pulling away violently if led near. Dogs barked toward the windbreak but would not cross open ground to reach it. Birds abandoned nearby nests entirely, leaving the trees empty except for the figures that appeared during wind. Over time, fear replaced skepticism. The low, steady tone grew more intense, filling the air with an unsettling pressure. People avoided windows facing the tree line during storms. Curtains were drawn. Lamps were extinguished. No one ventured outside once the wind rose, even for urgent tasks. Those who did reported lasting effects. Some experienced headaches that persisted long after storms ended. Others described a lingering sensation of being observed, especially when walking near the windbreak on calm days. The trees felt closer than before, their gaps darker and deeper. The village began to empty. Families left gradually, citing unease and exhaustion. The windbreak that once protected them now defined a boundary they did not trust. Homes were abandoned intact, as if people expected to return once conditions improved. Years later, Windbreak Village stands silent behind the same line of trees. The windbreak remains dense and tall, still effective at reducing wind force. In calm weather, it appears ordinary, even peaceful. During heavy wind, the figures return. Visitors who approach during storms describe the same sight. Tall shapes standing between trunks, stretching upward as gusts intensify. The figures do not acknowledge observers. They do not advance or retreat. Attempts to photograph them yield inconsistent results. Some images show elongated shadows where no person stands. Others capture nothing at all. Video footage often distorts near the tree line, blurring vertical shapes that disappear when playback is paused. Researchers proposed natural explanations. Optical illusions caused by moving branches. Shadows cast by uneven lighting. The brain imposing patterns under stress. Yet none of these theories explain the consistent proportional distortion or the way the figures respond directly to wind intensity. Local belief frames the figures as extensions of the wind itself. That the trees, planted to block storms, became conduits instead. The wind, compressed and redirected, found shape between trunks, stretching upward where resistance was greatest. Others believe the village created a boundary that demanded balance. The trees blocked what should have passed freely. The figures represent that pressure made visible, forms that appear only when force exceeds what the land was meant to hold. Those who linger near the windbreak during storms describe a powerful urge to step closer. Not out of curiosity, but compulsion. The feeling grows stronger the longer one watches the figures stretch and compress with each gust. Most retreat instinctively, unsettled by how inviting the movement feels. At dawn after storms, the tree line returns to silence. Branches rest. Gaps show nothing but shadow and bark. The ground bears no footprints, no signs of presence. The windbreak resumes its original purpose, shielding what remains of the village. Windbreak Village remains abandoned. Homes stand intact, their windows dark. Paths are overgrown. The trees continue to grow, thickening the barrier year after year. But when storms return, the space between them fills again. Figures rise where trunks stand closest. Stretching upward, taller than they should be. Holding position against the force they were meant to stop. Waiting within the windbreak, shaped by pressure, visible only when the storm demands their return. The farm village of Rusted Nail sat at the edge of fertile land where fields stretched in careful rows and tools were passed down through generations. The soil was dark and rich, broken each season by steady hands and simple machines. Life there followed routine, shaped by planting and harvest, sunrise and rest. The village took its name from a small blacksmith shop near the center of town. Old nails, bent and reused, were kept in open bins outside the forge. Nothing was wasted. Metal was straightened, sharpened, and put back to work. The sound of hammer on iron was once as common as birdsong. The first injuries seemed ordinary. A farmer cut his hand on a fence wire he had handled 100 times before. Another stepped back suddenly, clutching his arm, swearing he had been stabbed by a thorn that no one could find. These incidents were chalked up to fatigue, distraction, bad luck. Then they kept happening. People reported sudden sharp pains while standing still, walking familiar paths, or working with bare hands. The sensation was brief but intense, like being pricked by something small and precise. When they checked, there was nothing there. No nail. No splinter. No mark beyond a faint redness that faded quickly. Injuries happened indoors and out. Day and night. Near tools and far from them. Even children complained of sharp stings while playing in open fields, dropping toys and staring at their palms in confusion. The village grew uneasy. Farmers inspected their land carefully. Old boards were replaced. Fences were rebuilt. Tools were cleaned and checked daily. Nails were collected and stored away. The blacksmith sealed his scrap bins and swept the ground until it was bare earth. Some villagers began wearing gloves and thick clothing at all times. Others moved cautiously, stepping slowly as if expecting the ground itself to lash out. A quick jab at the ankle. A sharp point at the shoulder. A sudden pain in the back that made people gasp and spin around. Nothing was ever found. Doctors who visited the village could find no cause. No infection. No foreign objects. No environmental hazard that explained the precise, localized pain. They suggested stress, suggestion, coincidence. The villagers knew better. The injuries began to affect work. People flinched constantly, afraid of the next unseen prick. Tools were dropped. Crops went unattended. Animals grew restless, refusing certain fields entirely. Even livestock seemed uneasy, jerking away from empty air or stamping suddenly as if bitten. The name Rusted Nail took on a darker meaning. Villagers joked less about it. Some stopped saying it aloud altogether. The blacksmith closed his shop, unable to explain why metal seemed to be hurting people without touching them. The turning point came during harvest season. Several workers collapsed in the fields after repeated sharp pains struck one after another. Not severe enough to cause lasting injury, but enough to overwhelm. Fear spread quickly. Work stopped entirely. Meetings were held in the village hall. People spoke in hushed tones, sharing stories that sounded too similar to ignore. Everyone had been pricked. Everyone had felt it. No one had seen anything. The conclusion formed quietly, without argument. The village was no longer safe. Leaving Rusted Nail was not easy. The land had supported families for generations. Homes were solid. Fields were productive. Yet the injuries showed no sign of stopping, and the anxiety they caused was worse than the pain itself. Families packed and left in small groups. Tools were left behind. Equipment stood where it had last been used. Fields went unharvested. The blacksmith locked his doors and walked away without taking a single nail with him. Years later, visitors began to explore the empty village. They found houses intact but dusty. Fields overgrown but fertile. Tools rusting quietly where they had been dropped. Nothing appeared dangerous at first glance. The place felt calm, almost peaceful. Then the pains returned. Visitors reported sudden sharp sensations while walking through the village. A prick at the wrist while touching a doorframe. A sting at the calf while crossing an empty yard. The pain was brief but unmistakable. Enough to make them jump or cry out. Again, nothing was found. No thorns. No insects. No sharp edges where the pain struck. The sensation felt too deliberate, too precise, like a point pressed exactly where it should not be. Some visitors reported multiple stings in quick succession. Others felt a single sharp pain and left immediately, unwilling to stay longer. Those who lingered noticed a growing tension in their bodies, bracing constantly, waiting for the next unseen contact. Researchers investigated the site. They tested soil, air, and structures. They found old nails embedded deep in beams and boards, but nothing exposed or loose enough to explain the sensations. Electromagnetic readings were normal. No toxins were present. The phenomenon remained unexplained. Local stories began to circulate again. People said Rusted Nail had absorbed years of careless injury. Generations of small wounds, punctures, and accidents had soaked into the place itself. The land remembered every careless step, every cut finger, every sharp mistake. According to this belief, the village learned how to hurt. Not violently. Not to kill. Just enough to remind anyone there to be careful, to flinch, to feel unease. The pricks were not attacks, but echoes of countless small injuries repeated endlessly. Visitors often describe a strange awareness while walking through Rusted Nail. A sense that every surface is watching. That the ground is tense. That the air itself feels pointed. Even standing still feels risky, as if something unseen might reach out at any moment. The pain never leaves marks. Skin remains unbroken. Clothing shows no damage. The sensation fades quickly, but the memory lingers sharply. Many leave convinced they narrowly avoided something worse, though nothing ever escalates beyond the sting. Animals avoid the area entirely. Wildlife paths curve around the village. Birds land briefly, then take off. Grazing animals refuse to enter the fields, stopping at invisible boundaries as if warned. Today, rusted nail remains empty. Buildings stand silent. Tools rust undisturbed. Fields grow wild. No fences keep people out. Yet few choose to stay long once they feel the first unseen prick. The village does not announce its danger. It does not threaten or trap. It simply reminds those who enter that something here learned pain too well. And now shares it freely, one sharp moment at a time. Those who leave carry the sensation with them for days. A phantom sting. A sudden flinch. A memory of being touched by something that could not be seen. Rusted nail waits quietly, its field still fertile, its home still standing. But anyone who walks its paths learns quickly why no one lives there anymore. The pain comes without warning. As if pricked by something unseen. And once felt, it is impossible to forget. Prairie Shade Village sits alone in the open grassland, surrounded by miles of gently rolling prairie. The land is wide and exposed, broken only by scattered fence lines and a few lone trees that rise from the fields like markers left behind. From a distance, the village appears peaceful, quiet, and untouched. During the day, the prairie feels endless. Wind moves freely across the grass, bending it in slow waves. The sky stretches wide overhead, casting long shadows that shift naturally with the sun. The village rests in that light, its buildings simple and weathered, shaped by years of routine and isolation. It was never a large settlement. Prairie Shade Village grew slowly, built around farming and livestock. Families relied on the land, watching the seasons carefully, reading signs in soil and sky. Droughts came more often. Yields shrank. Younger generations left for places where opportunity felt closer. One by one, houses emptied, fields went quiet, and Prairie Shade Village slipped into stillness. What remained was space. Wide, open land where nothing blocked the sun or hid the ground. People noticed small things. Shadows beneath the lone trees seemed darker than they should have been. They pooled tightly at the base of trunks, even when the sun stood high. The edges looked sharper, heavier, as though the light struggled to reach the ground beneath them. Then the shadows began to move. On calm days, when the wind stopped and the grass stood still, the shadows shifted anyway. Farmers working nearby paused to watch. The shadows moved independently, drifting slightly away from the trees, then settling back again. No clouds crossed the sky. No breeze stirred the branches. Yet the darkness on the ground continued its quiet motion. As daylight faded, the effect became stronger. At dusk, shadows gathered beneath the trees in thicker patches, merging together until the ground looked almost solid black. The prairie beyond remained visible, washed in fading orange and purple light, but beneath the trees, darkness deepened unnaturally. Residents began avoiding those areas. Standing near the shadows produced an uneasy sensation, a feeling of pressure rather than fear. The air felt dense, as though something invisible occupied the space. Sound seemed muted there, footsteps softer, voices subdued. Then the shadows changed shape. Witnesses described seeing dark forms stretch upward from the ground, pulling free from the flat shapes they once were. Slowly, deliberately, they rose, taking on upright outlines that resembled standing figures. Their lower edges remained connected to the shadow beneath the tree, as if anchored there. Above, they formed vague silhouettes, head and shoulders suggested rather than defined. The movement was careful. No sudden gestures. No rush. The shadows rose as if learning how to stand, pausing often, adjusting their shape before continuing. When fully upright, they remained still, facing outward toward the open prairie. They did not walk. They did not reach. Those who watched felt intensely aware of being seen, though no eyes were visible. The sensation lingered even after the shape settled back into the ground, dissolving once more into flat shadow. The phenomenon followed a pattern. It occurred only near lone trees, never near buildings or fences. The more isolated the tree, the stronger the effect. Trees standing far from others gathered the deepest shadows. Night intensified everything. Under moonlight, shadows pooled even where there should have been none. The prairie floor darkens beneath trees regardless of angle or phase. On nights when the moon was bright, the contrast became impossible to ignore. Shadows rose again. They stood taller at night, their outlines more distinct, their presence more pronounced. Some appeared broader. Others thinner. All remained silent and motionless once upright. No sound accompanied them. No footsteps. No rustling. Only the steady presence of darkness shaped into form. Those who stayed too long reported physical sensations. A tightening in the chest. A heaviness in the limbs. Thoughts slowed, drawn inward. The feeling faded quickly upon leaving the area, as if crossing an invisible boundary. Animals avoided the trees at night. Livestock refused to graze nearby. Birds did not roost there after sunset. Even insects seemed quieter in the immediate vicinity, leaving pockets of unnatural stillness beneath the branches. Local elders shared their thoughts cautiously. They believed the shadows were tied to absence. The land once supported life, movement, and noise. When the village emptied, something remained unbalanced. The shadows gathered where people once gathered, beneath trees that had offered rest and shelter. Not of bodies, but of presence. The way soil holds water, absorbing what passed through it and releasing it slowly over time. They stayed among the fields, beneath trees that once watched over working hands and resting bodies. They did not enter homes or move along roads. Their place was the open land. By dawn, everything returned to normal. Sunlight scattered the darkness. Shadows behaved as expected again, stretching and shrinking naturally with the day. The prairie looked empty and calm, offering no evidence of what had occurred overnight. Yet those who had seen it knew better. They carried the image of shadows rising, standing upright beneath silent trees, watching a land that no longer needed them yet could not release them. Prairie Shade Village remains abandoned. Grass grows tall around empty buildings. Wind moves freely across the fields. From a distance, the place looks peaceful, even welcoming. But as the sun lowers and light softens, shadows gather once more beneath the lone trees. They move even when nothing else does. And sometimes, slowly and deliberately, they rise upright again. Holding their place in a landscape that remembers being watched, long after the watchers themselves have gone. Grainfield Crossing sits in the open stretch of land between two abandoned villages. Where the road there is straight and narrow, worn smooth by decades of travel that no longer comes. Tall grass surrounds it on all sides, moving constantly with the wind, bending and rising like slow waves across the fields. Once, this crossing was vital. Wagons traveled between the villages daily, carrying grain, tools, letters, and people whose lives were tied to the land. The route was simple but dependable, cutting directly through the fields rather than around them. Wheels left deep tracks in the soil, and the sound of travel carried far across the open space. When both villages declined, the crossing lost its purpose. Farms were abandoned. Homes emptied. The road remained, but fewer people used it each year. Eventually, Grainfield Crossing became a place passed through only by necessity, a quiet line between places that no longer existed in any practical sense. By day, it feels empty but calm. Grass leans toward the road, brushing its edges softly. Insects hum low in the heat. The wind is constant, shaping the fields without resistance. Nothing appears out of place, and nothing suggests movement beyond what the breeze provides. At night, the crossing feels different. Travelers passing through after sunset report hearing the sound of wagons rolling across the fields. The noise begins faintly, almost mistaken for wind moving through dry stalks. Then it grows clearer, resolving into a steady rhythm. Wooden wheels turning. The sound carries weight, a deep rumble paired with the subtle creak of axles under load. It moves across the fields parallel to the road, keeping pace with those who travel through the crossing. There are no lights. No lanterns sway in the darkness. Headlights reveal only grass bending and rising, untouched by anything solid. Yet the sound remains unmistakable, too structured to belong to wind alone. Those who slow their vehicles hear more detail. The crunch of wheels pressing into soil. The soft clatter of something shifting within a wagon bed. The faint impression of effort, as though the load is heavy but familiar. The sound never rushes, never stumbles. When travelers stop, the wagons stop. The noise fades into the wind, leaving only the sound of grass moving. Starting forward again brings the rolling sound back, matching speed and distance as if resuming an interrupted journey. Walking through the crossing produces the same effect. Footsteps fall in time with the unseen wheels. The sound moves just beyond reach, always out in the fields rather than on the road itself. Always out in the fields rather than on the road itself. Turning toward it reveals nothing but darkness and grass swaying under starlight. The wagons are never seen. No tracks appear in the soil. No grass is flattened or disturbed. The fields remain unchanged, as though the sound passes through rather than across them. Those familiar with the area recognize the route. The sound follows the old travel line between the two villages, a path once marked by heavy use. Even where the road has faded into grass, the wagons seem to know where to go, maintaining their course with practiced certainty. The experience leaves travelers uneasy. Not frightened, but unsettled by the precision of it. The sound feels purposeful, as if the wagons are completing a task rather than wandering aimlessly. There is no sense of accident or confusion, only repetition. Recordings capture fragments of the noise. Low rolling tones and faint creaks appear on audio devices, layered beneath wind. Playback lacks the depth and clarity of the live experience, reducing the sound to something almost ordinary. Investigations find nothing unusual. There are no underground structures. No nearby roads that could account for distant traffic. The sound does not match modern vehicles. It follows no schedule, appearing only after dark and only within the boundaries of the crossing. Local stories fill the silence. They speak of farmers who continued hauling grain long after profits fell, refusing to abandon routine. Of wagons that traveled even in poor conditions, driven by necessity rather than choice. Of journeys repeated so often they became habit rather than decision. Some believe the land remembers movement. They suggest the fields hold echoes of labor pressed into the soil over generations. Others believe the sound marks unfinished passage, a route that never truly closed despite the villages that once depended on it. No voices accompany the wagons. There are no calls, no commands to animals, no conversation drifting on the night air. Only the steady turning of wheels, patient and methodical. Wildlife reacts subtly. Animals pause at the edges of the fields, listening. Insects shift their rhythm slightly as the sound passes through. Nothing flees, but nothing approaches either. The wagons never cross the road. They remain in the fields, moving parallel but separate, as if bound to a path that does not intersect with the present. Travelers report the sound fading only when the crossing is fully behind them. The fields lie still under moonlight. Grass bends in the wind. The road stretches empty between abandoned places. The sound is gone, leaving only memory. Grainfield Crossing remains unchanged. The villages at either end continue to decay, their structures slowly returning to the land. The road persists, thin and quiet, cutting through grass that never stops moving. At night, the crossing waits. Those who pass through hear the wagons rolling across the fields, steady and unseen. Completing journeys that no longer serve a purpose. The sound keeps pace, then falls away, leaving travelers alone with the wind. And the awareness that some paths continue to be traveled long after the reasons for them have disappeared. The grass bends. The road stretches on. And somewhere just beyond sight, wheels continue to turn, carrying nothing through fields that remember everything. Black Sky was a small farming village set beneath a wide horizon where weather could be seen long before it arrived. The land there was flat and open, fields stretching without interruption toward distant hills. Clouds were part of daily life, studied carefully by those whose work depended on rain and sun arriving in balance. The storm that changed everything arrived faster than anyone expected. Dark clouds gathered with unusual speed, piling high and dense until daylight dimmed into an early dusk. Wind swept across the fields in sudden bursts, bending crops low and tearing loose anything not firmly secured. Rain followed in sheets so heavy the ground struggled to absorb it. Lightning flashed continuously, illuminating the village in stark, frozen moments. Thunder rolled without pause, overlapping itself until individual strikes could no longer be counted. Roofs failed. Trees fell. People ran for shelter, some not reaching it in time. When the storm finally passed, Black Sky was changed. Several residents had lost their lives during the night, caught outdoors or trapped by collapsing structures. The fields were flattened. Homes stood damaged and exposed. The air felt different, heavy and unsettled, as if the storm had left something behind. The village never fully recovered. Some families stayed for a time, rebuilding what they could, but the sense of safety was gone. Storms returned season after season, each one bringing renewed anxiety. Eventually, Black Sky was abandoned, left to weather and memory. Years later, the sightings began. Travelers passing near the fields during storms reported shapes standing far from the road. At first, they were mistaken for fence posts or damaged equipment left behind. But as lightning flashed, the shapes resolved into human figures. They stood motionless. Spread across the open fields, the figures faced the sky, positioned as if intentionally placed rather than scattered. Their silhouettes were dark against the lighter clouds, clearly upright and unmistakably human in outline. Their arms were raised. Both arms extended upward, palms angled toward the clouds above. The posture was consistent across every sighting. No figure stood with arms lowered. No one moved or changed position, even as wind and rain intensified. The posture did not suggest distress or shelter. It appeared deliberate, almost ceremonial. They did not turn toward observers or away from the storm. Their attention remained fixed on the sky. As storms grew stronger, more figures appeared. On nights with light rain, only a few could be seen at the edges of fields. During severe weather, dozens appeared, spaced evenly across the land where crops once grew. The field seemed occupied again, not by life, but by attention. They remained in the open ground, as if bound to the fields themselves. No sightings placed them near buildings or roads. Their presence was tied to exposure, to the places where wind and rain struck without obstruction. Attempts to observe more closely failed. Those who tried to walk toward the figures found distance difficult to judge. The ground felt uneven, though it appeared flat. Movement seemed slower than expected. When lightning struck again, the figures appeared no closer than before. Looking away briefly often caused them to vanish. Turning back revealed empty fields, rain flattening grass where figures had stood moments earlier. But when the next storm arrived, the figures returned to the same locations, unchanged. Photographs captured little. Some images showed faint dark shapes in the distance reminded of silhouettes. Video footage struggled with contrast, lightning overwhelming detail and leaving only impressions rather than clear forms. Local belief tied the figures to the storm itself. The residents lost during the original disaster were remembered as people caught under open sky, exposed to the full force of the weather. The idea grew that those final moments, focused on survival and the overwhelming presence of the storm, left an imprint on the land. The raised arms are often interpreted as instinctive. A reaction to falling debris, blinding rain, or sudden light. Others see the posture as acceptance rather than defense, a final orientation toward the sky that determined their fate. Those who remain near the fields during storms report physical sensations. Standing within sight of the figures creates pressure in the chest, as if breathing requires more effort. The air feels charged, thick with static. Some experience ringing in the ears or difficulty focusing, symptoms that fade once they leave the area. Animals avoid the fields during storms. Livestock from nearby farms refuse to enter the land, pulling away violently if led close. Birds disappear long before clouds fully gather, leaving the sky empty except for lightning and the raised arms below. The figures do not appear during clear weather. They arrive only when storms approach, emerging gradually as clouds darken. The stronger the storm, the more defined they become. When rain stops and wind calms, they fade from view, dissolving back into empty fields. No one has seen them leave. There is no retreat or dispersal. They simply cease to be visible, as if the attention holding them in place has moved elsewhere. Black sky remains abandoned. The fields have partially recovered, grasses replacing crops. Ruins of homes sit low against the horizon. The land looks peaceful beneath open blue sky, offering no sign of what returns with bad weather. Those who have witnessed the figures describe a lasting impression. They remember the contrast between movement and stillness. They remember the contrast between movement and stillness. Wind tearing across the land while the figures stand unmoved. Rain striking hard while arms remain raised, unwavering. The figures do not ask for help. They do not gesture or call out. Their presence feels purposeful rather than desperate. They stand as if fulfilling a role tied to the storm itself. The danger is not immediate or violent. It reveals itself only to those who watch the sky and stay when storms arrive. When thunder rolls and clouds sink low, the fields fill again. Dark figures stand beneath the blackened sky. Arms raised. Facing the storm that never truly left. The most remote village lies beyond the last maintained road. Where the land opens into a wide plain of tall grass and scattered stone. It is known as Still Wind, a name given long before anyone understood how literal it would become. Travelers approach it through miles of open country where air is almost always moving. Brushing the grass into constant motion. Then, without warning, the wind stops. The change is immediate and absolute. Leaves freeze mid-sway. Loose fabric hangs limp. Sound collapses into a hollow quiet that feels heavier than noise. The absence presses against the ears, creating a sensation like standing underwater without the weight. Still Wind was built in this place intentionally. Early settlers believed the calm would protect crops and livestock. They built low homes with wide roofs and planted fields that thrived in stable air. Windmills were never needed. Fires burned evenly. Smoke rose straight up and disappeared. For years, the village prospered. People spoke softly there, not out of fear, but because loud voices felt out of place. The quiet encouraged patience. Arguments faded quickly. Visitors often commented on how peaceful it felt. The silence did not feel empty at first. It felt complete. As if nothing needed to be added. The stillness deepened slowly over time. What began as calm became something heavier. Travelers noticed the quiet lingering longer than expected. Wind that stirred the surrounding plains never entered the village. Even storms passed around it, leaving rain without movement, clouds sliding overhead without sound. Those who stayed overnight described the first symptoms. Sleep came easily, too easily. Waking felt unnecessary. Muscles grew heavy, as if gravity itself had increased. Standing required effort. Sitting felt like a relief. Then came the urge to lie down. Not from exhaustion, but from comfort. The grass in still wind grew thick and soft, shaped by years without disturbance. Lying there felt natural, supported, as if the ground welcomed the weight. People rested longer than planned. Hours passed unnoticed. Worries lost meaning. The idea of leaving felt distant, almost abstract. Why move when everything felt complete exactly where it was? The first disappearances were quiet. A traveler failed to arrive at the next settlement. A shepherd never returned from checking the outskirts. Villagers assumed accidents or illness. Search parties were sent, but they struggled to stay focused within the stillness. Those who searched felt it too. The silence drained urgency from their movements. Commands felt unnecessary. Steps slowed. Some sat down without realizing why. Staring across the grass as if waiting for something that never came. When bodies were found, they showed no signs of struggle. People lay peacefully in the grass, positioned as if resting. Faces were calm. Hands relaxed. There was no indication of pain or fear, only stillness so complete it felt intentional. Word spread slowly. Still Wind gained a reputation as a place that took more than it gave. Travelers began to avoid it, skirting the plains rather than crossing them. Maps still marked the village, but routes were drawn around it like water flowing around stone. The villagers themselves tried to leave. Some succeeded by moving quickly, never stopping, never sitting. Others found the urge to rest overwhelming before they reached the edge of the plains. A few turned back, convinced they had forgotten something important, only to settle again into the quiet. Eventually, the village emptied. Homes were left intact. Doors closed but not locked. Fields went untended, yet grass continued to grow thick and even. Still Wind did not decay the way other abandoned places did. Without wind, erosion slowed. Structures remained unnaturally preserved. The silence remained perfect. Today, visitors who approach Still Wind describe a distinct boundary. At a certain point, the constant prairie breeze dies instantly. Sound falls away. Even the faint hum inside the ears seems muted. Stepping past that line feels like stepping into another world. Those who enter feel relief first. The absence of noise is soothing. The mind quiets. Muscles relax. The tension carried unknowingly through daily life dissolves within minutes. Then the heaviness begins. Limbs feel weighted. Balance shifts subtly. Standing still becomes difficult, not because of instability, but because stillness feels too complete to resist. The urge to stop moving grows stronger with every step. People describe a voice that is not a sound. An internal suggestion rather than an external call. A thought that does not feel like one's own, but also does not feel foreign. It simply states that there is no reason to leave. Sitting becomes the compromise. Most sit first. On steps. Against walls. In the grass. The relief is immediate. The body settles as if it has reached its intended place. Lying down feels inevitable. The sky above still wind appears larger, closer. Clouds seem to pause. Sunlight feels warmer. Time stretches thin until it loses meaning altogether. Those who lie down often stop thinking about rising. Search teams who venture in now work under strict rules. They move in pairs. They keep speaking, even when speech feels unnecessary. They do not sit. They do not stop for more than moments at a time. Even then, many report the overwhelming urge to lie down pressing against them constantly. Some leave shaken. They describe the silence as seductive, not threatening. It does not chase or frighten. It offers rest without consequence, even as consequence quietly unfolds. Scientists studying still wind have found nothing definitive. Air pressure remains normal. Oxygen levels are stable. There are no toxins. No electromagnetic anomalies strong enough to explain the effect. The stillness remains unexplained, both in cause and in depth. Locals from distant towns share older stories. They say the land learned stillness during a time of great waiting. That people once lay in the grass here for reasons lost to memory, staying so long that the wind learned to stop for them. According to these stories, still wind is not a trap. It is a promise kept too well. The promise of rest. Of quiet. Of an end to movement and effort. By dusk, the effect intensifies. As light softens, the silence deepens further. The urge to lie down becomes nearly irresistible, pressing gently but firmly. Most who enter at this hour do not leave. Still wind remains untouched. Grass waves only when walked through. Buildings stand as they were left. No animals graze there. Birds do not land. Insects avoid the boundary instinctively. The village does not call out. It does not warn. It simply waits in perfect silence, holding its calm like a held breath. Those who pass quickly may escape its influence, carrying with them a memory of profound quiet. Those who linger learn why the village is empty. Because in still wind, when everything finally stops moving, the desire to move again fades with it. And for some, lying down in the grass feels so complete, so final, that rising again never crosses the mind at all. You have now wandered through 20 haunted windswept farm villages in Kansas. Places shaped by endless horizons, isolation, and hardship. Where the wind carried hopia. And then carried everything away. These villages may look peaceful in daylight. Quiet. Empty. But when night falls, the prairie listens. The wind remembers. And the past moves freely across the fields. If you ever travel the back roads of Kansas at night, pay attention to the wind. Do not follow voices you cannot see. And never enter a village that feels wrong. Thank you for spending this eerie journey with me. Slow your breathing. Let the sound of the wind fade from your thoughts. And if you hear something whispering outside tonight, remember. Not every voice belongs to the living. Until our next journey into the darkness. Stay safe.